Did you know that a main reason for having design lines in fashion is to optimize the fit of garments? What is a design line? A design line is a seam in the garment, and often this has more to do with the fit than you might even know. Now, you will notice in the fashion design book with all of the flat garment sketches that are in there that many of them don't have specific design lines. And that's because I want it to be up to you, the designer, to add the design lines in the areas where you want them. In some of the styled tops and some of the dresses, I've added a few design lines or darts sparingly, just so that you have a reference on how to draw them and where those design lines or darts might be good to have. There are two main reasons for having design lines. Number one, as a pattern maker, I say the number one reason is to optimize the fit. Number two, from a designer's perspective, it would be to create a unique silhouette or style. I think often these two different parts of optimizing the fit and creating a unique style can definitely go together very well once you understand the pattern making essentials. So if you've been following along in this series about sketching, I want you to know that this video is a little bit more advanced. So in case you watch it and it doesn't quite click for you yet, don't worry. I want you to bookmark this location in the book where you scan the QR code and come back to it in the future. It will click with time. So if you're a beginner sewist or an aspiring designer, these concepts take a little bit of time to understand. Once you really grasp it, it will make you a stronger designer and sewist. If you haven't watched the previous video about pattern making terminology, I highly recommend that you go back and watch that video before you get into this one. You can find that video through the link in the QR code of the fashion design book. First, I want to show you a picture of a sloper. We've talked about this in previous videos now. So a sloper is a base pattern that is used to create style patterns. And now I want to show you how this pattern looks and how you would manipulate those darts to create a style. We'll do this on a very basic level, but it's just to get your mind rolling and understanding how the dart manipulation process works in optimizing design line locations. So as a designer, when you're designing, you always have to consider where the darts are on your sloper, because we always want to try to go through the points of the darts with our design line positions. So this means that we could have the design lines coming through the point of the apex or here to help eliminate the darts and help close them. So always think about where is the point of the dart? How can I put a design line through the point of the dart in order to optimize the fit? I think it'll make more sense as we go through the tutorial. Now I'm going to be using a mini sloper for this tutorial, which is the same thing just on a smaller scale. And I also have a pair of pants as a sloper as well. We're going to do what's called pattern manipulation, and we're going to be using this practice sloper to explain how we manipulate the sewing pattern, the base sewing pattern or sloper, to create a style pattern. So the fashion design book has many different design lines, and most of them are quite basic. So you as the designer should be sketching and designing your own looks for the different positions. But this tutorial is going to show you how we adjust a pattern to get the designs. And you're going to see how that princess seam is primarily used to optimize the fit. So we're going to be closing darts in order to achieve the princess seams. As a designer, you should always be trying to optimize the fit, especially for fitted garments. So if we were to take our sloper pattern, this is made from a moulage. We have many different darts here. We are first going to ignore this front dart. We're going to ignore that because that's primarily used for making wrap dresses, something like the wrap dress that we have here. You would utilize that and slash it out for that sort of thing so we don't have gaping at the bust area. But for this type of dress, we don't need to utilize that dart, so we're going to ignore that. Now we want to have a princess seam coming from the armhole area, and it should be this sort of shape. So we want to first imagine how this sloper is going to adjust according to the shape of the body. This is my armhole area here. So if I imagine this shape, it would have kind of this nice little princess heart shape here, mimicking the neckline here. And then my princess seam would come from the armhole. It would go through the apex, the bust area, to optimize the fit. And then we would slash out some of these darts. We would ignore this waist dart and cut apart the pattern. So let's do this. This is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be utilizing this seam here and this seam here to create part of our pattern. We imagine this seam here, and we're going to cut apart that seam. So we have one pattern piece over here. That's my center front. We're going to cut apart the top portion of that dart. Then we need to close this dart. We're going to slash and close that shut so we don't have any neckline gaping. This is called slashing and closing. You've probably seen it in another video. If you haven't watched that previous video, make sure you do so you understand the terminology here. We are optimizing the fit right now through style lines of princess seams. So this is our pattern piece for that front pattern. We would have it on the fold right here. And we would cut apart our pattern here. Now, since this is a dress, we would for sure lengthen this pattern piece for a dress. But since it already includes the hip area, all we have to do is lengthen it. We just have to add more to it. We are now discarding this upper portion of the sloper. We don't need that anymore. Then we need to close this dart, and we need to cut away this dart and this dart. We are not utilizing these darts. Let's go ahead and slash and close this side dart. Slashing and closing or folding. Then we're going to cut away this dart and this dart. We would need to make sure this is nice and curved at the point of the apex. We don't want to have a point. So usually we're shaving off just a tiny bit there to make a nice continuous curve at the apex. Make sure we have a nice curve here, no points. And then that is our pattern. So we're going to get a nice, beautiful shape for that princess seam. So you can see here and here, that's our beautiful pattern. So we have just optimized the fit of the garment through the design lines. Let's go ahead and do that with a midriff. What's a midriff? Let's go to the top section. A midriff generally goes through the waist area on a dress or on a blouse. So you're not going to see that many midriffs in the dresses section because it's considered a design line. That means that you can add your own design lines horizontally to create whatever sort of midriff you want. So this would be considered a midriff. We have two horizontal lines going below the bust and along the waist area. Those two seams could really be anywhere between below the bust and in the lower waist area. We also have this crop top here, and that's also a midriff here. So we have two horizontal lines make up a midriff. Let's use a sloper pattern to create this midriff pattern piece. If we imagine the pattern would be somewhere along here, we're going to shape the pattern to be as this is shown, and then we are going to draw the bottom portion of the top. So this is a crop top. This is going to be our midriff section. So we are optimizing the fit through the horizontal design lines on the style. we have the waist that we need to slash and close here. We're going to ignore this line. This is called waist shaping, and we only need that when we have very fitted garments. So we are going to slash and close or slash and fold that dart shut from the top portion here to the bottom portion here. And that is our midriff pattern piece here. We're going to ignore this waist shaping line. That's for other topics, which we won't get into in this short video. So that is our waist midriff right here. So you can see we've optimized the fit. It's going to be nice and close to the body because we've slashed out that dart. What do we do with the upper portion here? Well, this is really up to you and your design lines and what you want. So in the example from the fashion design book, we have some pleats coming out of the bottom. And depending on the size of the bust, you might need to add more pleats or make sure you have enough stretch over the bust that you don't need as many pleats. So we would follow the same exact process of closing out these darts and shifting them into pleats down here. So we want to have them somewhat close to the apex, and I'm not going to have the point directly at the apex. I want it to be a little bit lower for the location of my other pleats. So this is going to be one pleat here, and then I'm going to do 2 more pleats. So we're going to go to the direction of the apex, but not completely, and then we're going to pivot. So I am cutting open these 2, and these 2 are going to be my additional pleats. So I'm going to have 3 pleats. This is going to become a pleat, and then those 2. Now I need to close these darts here. So I can start by slashing and closing or folding and closing. So I've got one that's opened, and the other 2 are probably going to be going into this one here. And with these mini pattern pieces, it's a little bit tricky. And one of the things with pleats, we don't want them to be too shallow. If they're too shallow, they're going to just open right up. So we definitely need to have a minimum of about 1/2 inch on each side of that pleat, which is 1 inch total. And if you're working in centimeters, that's about 2.5 centimeters total. So we're closing up this upper dart. And we can't fully close that because that one has that slight curve to it, but that's okay. We're just making sure the top and the bottom are closed. And then we're going to shift this around into our additional pleats. I'm going to add that piece of paper here. So this becomes one pleat here. This becomes another pleat here. And this is another pleat. We can draw arrows indicating the way we want them to fold, and then we would actually fold those shut to get the line of the bottom here. Use a tracing wheel to get the bottom, and we would definitely need to true this bottom line, make sure it's nice and smooth. We ignore the center front dart because that's only for wrap dresses or corsets or bras, and we would then draw in any other design lines like the different neckline, and then this is it. So this is the concept for a midriff and adding pleats. And a bonus to see how to do the dart manipulation and switch those darts into pleats. Now, just like the other videos that we've talked about now, shirring, gathering, ruching, darts, pleats, all of these different topics can help aid in the fit. You can see that we're getting a nicer fitting garment because of those design details, but they're also fitting details. If you're enjoying this video, please make sure you like and subscribe so that this video can spread to more people. I appreciate it so much. Let's continue to make more design lines that are optimizing our fit through the sloper. So we have a top and then we have a pair of pants, and we want to add a yoke seam. So the yoke seam is on the upper portion of the garment usually. On a pair of jeans, it's really common to have a yoke. And on a button-down shirt, it's really common to have a yoke in the back and even in the front of the garment sometimes. So let's draw our darts in so that you can visually see where those darts are. This in the back is called waist shaping, which is found on sloper patterns made from a moulage. So we have our darts, and I'm just going to do it simultaneously between the top and the pair of jeans or pants. And we can get as creative as we want with a design line and the shape. So I'm going to come up with a design line that's kind of curving down slightly like that. Nice little curve to it. And this one, we'll go with kind of a more standard pair of jeans yoke for this example. Many times with the pants, we can't go directly through the point because it gets too low to have pockets. So we usually have to bump it up a little bit, but it doesn't affect the fit. So let's cut across those design lines. We're going to slash and close those darts shut or slash and fold. Tape them closed, they stay closed, and that creates our yoke. Same thing here, slash and close or fold and close. So that closed pattern piece becomes our yoke seam. Now we often need to shave off a little bit or add a tiny bit to get a nice continuous line because we don't want any V here. Then the additional amount that's there, we are often taking a little bit off here and a little bit off here when it's in that position. So that is our yoke. And you can get as creative as you want with those shapes of those yoke design lines. We have just optimized our fit through the use of design lines and design details like pleats. Remember, we don't always need to eliminate darts, but you can see by adding design lines, it helps us eliminate them. We can also change darts to pleats, or we can change that to gathering. We can also add ruching onto our styles, and we can do all of those things to optimize the fit. After you have done any sort of pattern manipulation or dart manipulation, you need to add seam allowances because our slopers do not have seam allowances, and that is the next step in the process. All right, I hope this was really eye-opening to you to understand how the pattern looks when you have to add a design line. I wanted to give you just a quick tip about how to avoid design lines that might not be very flattering to the person. Now, this could be true for either menswear or women's wear. And we need to consider where the body tends to gain weight. We often don't want to have very curved lines in those areas. For example, if you have a top and you have a design line that's rounding all the way up and all the way back down, that might not be very aesthetically pleasing for the tummy area. If you're designing for yourself, you probably know the areas on your body where you don't want to accentuate them. We don't necessarily want to hide them because we love our bodies, but we might not want to accentuate them. And you can think about your design lines as it relates to those areas. If you're designing for a client, you can simply ask the client, are there any parts that you would like to avoid accentuating? I try not to use the word hide or cover up because I truly believe that our bodies are perfect the way they are. It's just that when we wear certain garments, if they give a different aesthetic to the way the body looks, we might not feel as comfortable in them. And to me, fashion is all about being comfortable in your clothes and absolutely loving them. All right, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I certainly have. This has been one video that I love to explain to aspiring designers and designers who I have just started working with as a pattern maker. It definitely strengthens their design sense. Now, if this didn't all click for you, I want you to bookmark it in your fashion design book so that you can scan this QR code in the future and rewatch this video in a couple years. It's one that you're going to constantly want to remind and refresh yourself on. In case you don't have the fashion design book, you can find it on Amazon and most online book retail stores. And you can click the link in the description below. I'm Gina Renee, and I teach online design and pattern making courses so that you can design and sew clothes you love that fit. If you've enjoyed today's video, I would love it if you liked and subscribed, and I'll see you in the next one.